turn it over to her at this time.
Hey, I'm Cheryl Sullenger, and I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for Operation Rescue. And I'm here to urge the legislature here in Iowa to pass the fetal pain bill that would ban abortions after 20 weeks when viable babies can feel pain. We believe that this is a really critical, in fact, urgent piece of legislation for the people of Iowa at this particular point in time for a number of reasons. But probably the thing that makes it most urgent is that Nebraska abortionist Leroy Carhart has made plans to open an abortion clinic in Iowa that would do late-term abortions of the kinds that were done at George Tiller's now closed abortion clinic in Wichita, Kansas. In fact, Leroy Carhart worked for George Tiller for about 12 years, was trained by him, and follows very many of the same protocols from Women's Healthcare Services. And during, I actually am from Southern California. I'm originally, I should say, from Iowa. I grew up and was born and raised in Marshalltown, Iowa. And I lived in Southern California for a number of years. And there we had a lot of experience with a number of different kinds of abortionists, but we moved to Wichita, Kansas because we had experience in discovering the truth about what was really going on at these abortion clinics, and then we would report these things, these abuses that we discovered to the proper authorities, including the medical boards, and we were able to see a number of abortion clinics close in that state, and in fact, one entire abortion chain, an 11-office abortion chain, was closed because it was discovered that the owner was actually doing abortions and she had no medical license. And she's sitting in a California prison right now with about a 7-year prison sentence for doing illegal abortions in the state of California without a medical license. And so what we did was we moved to Wichita to apply the things that we learned in California to see if we could not stop the late-term abortions that were going on in that state. And so we made it our business to know what was going on at that abortion clinic. We had pro-lifers who had a continuous presence in front of that abortion clinic every hour it was open. We spoke extensively to women who had had experiences. We interviewed many, many, many women who had experiences, abortion experiences at that particular abortion clinic, and especially with Leroy Carhart. And we documented incidences where the ambulance would come and rush a patient to the emergency room with life-threatening complications from late-term abortions. So we became very, very familiar with late-term abortions and the way that the abortion clinics operate, and also the practices of Leroy Carhart in particular. We became very, very familiar with that. Right now, Leroy Carhart has been his late-term abortion business. He still has an early-term clinic in Bellevue, Nebraska. But his late-term business has been driven from Nebraska because they passed a bill very similar to the one that is being considered here in Iowa. And that was a good thing for the people of Nebraska. He opened up, or became employed at a late-term abortion clinic in Germantown, Maryland. We were able to obtain copies of his medical license application in the state of Maryland, and we found that he completely misrepresented himself and what his practice was all about. In fact, he represented himself to be an emergency room physician and a university professor. Well, he hasn't had an affiliation with a hospital since 1987, so I don't know how he thinks he can accurately portray himself as an emergency room physician. And as far as being a university professor, he has a title in name only, but they stripped him of any duties from the University of Nebraska in the 1990s, amid a scandal, in fact, involving a lawsuit and everything else. So that's not what he does for a living. What he does for a living is abortions. In fact, he's probably the best known late-term abortionist in the country, and his goal is to open a clinic that can attract patients from all over the country to his clinic where he can do abortions that are either illegal or not available in other states. And right now, we filed a complaint against Carhart in Maryland, and that complaint was accepted by the Maryland Board of Physicians. They sent me a letter, which is included in this packet, indicating that he's under full investigation in the state of Maryland. And they interviewed me, put me under oath, and I gave testimony under oath in this case. So it's a very serious investigation that he's under. And if he's found to have violated the standards of care or any of the codes or expectations in Maryland, it's very possible that he could lose his license there. And then Iowa becomes his last fallback position, his last fallback state that he can go to. He had been interested in reopening a clinic in Kansas, but that door, we helped shut that door, as a matter of fact, on him. And then the legislature in this last term passed a very similar late-term abortion ban based on fetal pain down there, and it's already been signed by Governor Brownback. So the door has been closed on him to go back to Kansas, and these are the states that he wanted to go to. He wanted to go to Kansas. He can't go back there. He's been forced to move out of Nebraska. He's in trouble and under investigation in the state of Maryland, and Iowa is his last fallback position. And so if this bill is passed, will help protect women from exploitation by this guy. And it's really a lot about money with him, really. He's not really a very good physician. I brought some photos, and Jenifer has some enlargements. Over a year period, actually a little longer than a year, but for these purposes, over about a 12-month period, we were able to document incidents of medical emergencies on patients where Carhart was the physician of duty. And in Kansas, they had to put on the internet and let people know like 24 hours in advance who their physician would be. And so that particular abortion clinic had an official little calendar that listed who was beyond duty on any particular day. And so we downloaded those calendars, and we found that Leroy Carhart was responsible for incident after incident after incident over the course of a 12-month period. And in Kansas, he had no hospital privileges, but the person he worked for, George Tiller, had privileges at Wesley Hospital. So you'll see actually George Tiller accompanying the women into the emergency room on the gurneys. But these are not George Tiller's personal patients. They were Leroy Carhart's patients. Carhart wasn't permitted in the hospital, and in fact, after Women's Healthcare Services closed, Wesley Hospital actually gave us a statement in writing saying that if Leroy Carhart applied for hospital privileges at that hospital, he would be denied that. Okay, so this is the kind of person we have. We have a person that has sent more than his share of women to the emergency room. The hospital won't allow him to darken the doorway, and now that state has actually banned this procedure so that he can't come and set up shop there anymore. But yet in Iowa, there's no protections for women. Like this woman here, who I personally saw writhing in pain as she was going into the hospital. Or this incident, which you can't see very good here, but this incident was an abortion death. A 19-year-old Down syndrome girl had been taken by her parents to this abortion clinic. Leroy Carhart performed her abortion, and she died. And we were shocked to hear the details of what happened to her. It was a complete case of incompetence, and she developed sepsis. It wasn't treated properly. There was a delay in calling 911 when she was finally brought back to the clinic. in an unconscious state. They called 911, they asked no lights, no sirens on the ambulance, they didn't want anybody to know, but we found out. And in our state at that time, there was a political climate that protected the abortionists, and this death was whitewashed, and no one was ever held accountable for the death of this poor innocent little girl. She never made a decision. Her name was Kristen Gilbert. She was 19. She had Down syndrome. She was raped. She was brought to an abortion clinic by her parents, not understanding what was going to happen. In fact, we made friends with her grandmother. Her grandmother sat in her office and told us, as she was sharing pictures of Kristen's life with us, how Kristen had understood that there was a baby in her tummy and what they were going to do to her baby. Kristen would have been very upset and would not have wanted that. Kristen made no choices. She was taken to that clinic, and she is dead. She never made a choice. It was all put on her, and the people responsible were never held accountable. And we believe that that is the kind of tragedy that we could see repeated here in the state of Iowa. Only this time, Leroy Carhart doesn't have a doctor to cover up for his mistakes. He doesn't have hospital privileges. His emergency plan is to send the women to the hospital and wash his hands of the whole mess and let someone else clean up after him. That's the emergency plan. You know, these are late-term abortions. For every week a woman progresses in her pregnancy, the risks that are associated with abortion dramatically increase. Late-term abortions are not the safe, legal little walk-in and walk-out procedure. They're multiple-day procedures that women have died from, and we have that documented, obviously. And so these abortion procedures, I wanted to show you this picture too, and if you want to come and get one of the handouts, you can take a closer look at this. For the people that say that babies don't feel pain, I wanted to talk to you about this baby. We call her Chelsea in order to protect her family. We actually know her real name. She was aborted because she had cystic fibrosis. She was aborted in the 26th week. And on her body you can see places where the skin has been torn from her, where the grasping instruments grasped her body to pull her down into the birth canal. You can see the hole where they pierced her skull and drained the contents of her skull. You can see where her skull collapsed and is like overlapping itself. This family actually had a memorial service at the abortion clinic for this baby. After it was dead, they photographed this baby. We have our entire album of pictures. And to this day, they very much regret actually having this abortion. And the mother told us that as she was holding her baby, she could feel the fluids from the baby's head dripping down her arm. And she said, I felt like my life was draining down my arm as she was holding that baby. And she still has a lot of traumatic issues from that today. So you can't tell me that babies don't feel pain, because we know that they do. Even George Tiller said that when he devised this method of injecting the heart with digoxin. He made the statement. We have it available on our website. You can go and look up more about abortion on one of our tabs, click late-term abortions, and you can see the quote where he said that the reason that he injects the heart is because then the babies don't feel the pain of the abortion when he actually pierces their skull. You know, he knew babies felt pain, and that's why he developed this lethal injection to the heart. But the lethal injection to the heart only sends the baby into cardiac arrest. Anyone that's had a heart attack usually will describe a heart attack as being very painful and very horrifying and a really terrible experience. So the baby does feel pain, and the families feel pain afterwards. And a lot of women have been scarred for life, emotionally and physically, because of these late-term abortions. And the state of Iowa does have an interest in protecting the public. And this bill would protect the women of Iowa, and actually, it would help protect women all across the country from being victimized in this way by this horrific abortion procedure. You know, abortion is not the only thing, the only solution to a woman who has a problem pregnancy. If a woman has a fetal anomaly, the compassionate thing to do is to allow the baby to be birthed and let God take care of the situation. There are perinatal hospice centers across the nation. There's one in Wichita that was located right next door to the late-term abortion clinic there that would care for these families who had babies that had conditions that they said were incompatible with life. And they would help counsel these people and prepare for the birth of their baby. These families could actually love their child and give the baby the love that and dignity that this child deserved in the few moments or minutes or even days of life that that child had. And then when that baby died, nobody had a guilty conscience about it because everybody did everything they could, and the baby had dignity and love in the short life. And if the mother's life is in danger, and incidentally, in the long history of late-term abortions in the state of Kansas, there is not one single recorded incident of a late-term abortion to save the mother's life. It's never happened. Never. And but if that were the case, a baby could be delivered and then you treat both patients. You don't have to kill the baby in order to save the mother. The baby may die in the course of being delivered prematurely, but you do everything you can. And now today, medicine has progressed to the point where babies born at very early ages survive when, even just a few years ago, they had very little hope. And now today, these babies are surviving. So this is a bill that is, I think, good for the state of Iowa. The last thing you want to be known as is the late-term abortion capital of the country. We experienced that in Kansas, and frankly, it traumatized the community. The community was traumatized by what went on down there. And there's one other point that I do want you to know in all of this. When George Tiller died, he had already announced his retirement because even though he had been acquitted of criminal charges related to illegal late-term abortions, the Kansas Board of Healing Arts had decided to go ahead and discipline him because they have a different standard, a burden of proof, than a criminal case. And so he had an 11-count petition and faced the revocation of his license. That was an open case at the time of his death, and the reason I know that is because I'm the one that filed a complaint against him. And in fact, we are the first ones that made the allegations that eventually sent him to the criminal trial. And so that clinic was closing, and so people were looking for other places. And the plan to relocate late-term abortions had already started, and I was one of the states that was being looked at. So you guys have an opportunity to close that down before it gets here. And once things like this get started in a state, it's very, very difficult to get them out. But you guys have a chance to nip this in the bud and protect women and their viable babies from exploitation and from serious risk and injury. And a lifetime of pain and remorse, really, because a lot of these women that we've talked to completely regret their abortions and suffer from it to this day. And so it's urgent. It can't wait till next year. If Carhart loses his medical license, we happen to have some informants that we've turned over to the Attorney General in the state of Nebraska. And some of our informants have they have a lot of really excellent knowledge about Carhart and his business, and we know that he's in dire financial straits. Without the expensive late-term abortions in his practice, he would not be able to survive financially, or he'd be hurting really bad. Late-term abortions are his bread and butter, and if he is shut down in Maryland, he's going to look for another place to do them, and Iowa's his next target. So please, I urge you with everything that we can to pass this bill and do it now before it's too late.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. a man who has for decades aggressively, relentlessly pursued the physical destruction of the most vulnerable of our society, our unborn, children who have never taken their first breath. According to Carhart's staff in federal trial testimony, he has his abortion practice down to a system. 6 abortions every 30 minutes. Working just 4 hours a day, 3 days a week, 144 babies lose their lives in his hands. Many of those are late-term abortions. In other testimony, he has been known to drink alcohol, talk on the phone with his bookie about his gambling choices, even falling asleep while administering anesthesia. In one instance, the patient indicated that he left the room where she was having the abortion, went outside, and began throwing rocks at her window. And now he has set his sights on Iowa, on our precious daughters, sisters, nieces, granddaughters, and friends, on the lives of their future children. When he made the announcement in November, he indicated he wanted to move to Maryland, Indiana, and Iowa. He opened up shop in December in Maryland, took over an existing facility in Indiana. Nothing is keeping him from moving to Iowa if we do not pass this late-term abortion ban. Currently, the state of Iowa restricts abortions after the end of the second trimester, which is 6 months or 24 weeks. This is an unenforceable law, as there is an exception for physicians who perform the abortion to preserve the pregnant woman's health. Health, not life. It does not mean the woman's life is in danger. Further, that definition of health is defined by her physician. That's a pretty big loophole, one that Mr. Carhart can drive his moving truck through, right over the Iowa border. For this reason, the late-term abortion ban was introduced January 10th, 2011, the first day of the legislative session. Stopgap emergency measure to stop Leroy Carhart before he destroyed a single Iowan. Often the question is raised, who is having the late-term abortions? According to Guttmacher Institute, the research arm of Planned Parenthood, the majority of the stated reasons for late-term abortions are startling. 71% of women did not realize that they were pregnant. 48% had difficulty making the abortion arrangements. 33% were afraid to tell their parents or their partner. 24% needed time to make the decision. And 8% hoped their relationship would change. Then we are told these abortions are rare. The implication being that they are so extraordinarily uncommon that legislation like this is not even necessary. Let's say that only 1.5% of abortions that occur after 21 weeks gestation, as the Guttmacher Institute suggests, with a minimum of 1.2 million abortions a year, that's 18,150 late-term abortions in a single year. An average of 50 dead babies a day. One baby dead is too many, but an average of 50 dead babies? It's no wonder that 4 states have now signed into law late-term abortion bans: Nebraska, Idaho, Oklahoma, and Kansas. And another dozen states are working on the legislation as well. We are told by some, including some here in the State House, that Mr. Carhart is not really going to enter Iowa. It's just a scare tactic we are using to pass this legislation. This is a web shot off of Mr. Carhart's website, abortionclinics.org. And hit visit there suggests this is no scare tactic. Here you have, when abortion becomes the choice you have to make, we believe you deserve the very best. Up here, a working tab for Southwest Iowa. Down here, Southwest Iowa, available soon. You select this Southwest Iowa tab, and you're directed to a page that contains a link to abortion fees. This is abortion fee schedule. For example, 4 weeks with a credit card, $515 for the abortion. 24 weeks, $3,090 for that abortion. Cheryl had indicated Kristen Gilbert, the young, loving 19-year-old, with Down syndrome, taken by her family to Mr. Carhart for an abortion in 2005. Having been raped by an unknown assailant, she was 28 weeks pregnant. An the rapist, her family, the abortionist, and his staff. A cold, indifferent 911 tape released revealed a woman on the phone who was more concerned that the ambulance came with no lights and siren than she was the beautiful girl who was innocently losing her life in their clinic. Think we won't lose our own Christians? Think again. Our Iowa Right to Life newsletter, releasing tomorrow, confirms that currently Iowa Medicaid is paying for abortions when the medical staff believes that that unborn child has Down syndrome. Think Leroy Carhart isn't aware of this? Think abortion clinics in the state of Iowa don't know this? Can we honestly say that we are protecting our own Kristen Gilberts, the ones living and breathing today, enjoying life with a bliss we can't even understand? We certainly are not protecting them in the womb, not if Iowa taxpayers are funding those abortions. Today, we are asking our pro-life friends to persist in contacting Senator Gronswell. He can continue to deflect this to the committee to which the bill is assigned, government oversight. But ultimately, the decision is in his hands. If he truly did not want Iowans, Nebraskans, Kansans, Missourians, South Dakotans, or Minnesotans to lose their lives in Iowa before they begin, he would move this bill into another committee or find another way to move this bill to the floor and ultimately to the desk of Governor Bromstead, who wishes to sign this bill. To the legislature, we plead with you to support the late-term abortion ban. We ask you to protect Iowa from further becoming a safe haven state for late-term abortion. The lives of our future children literally hang in the balance and must be saved from the destruction they face if we simply do nothing. I stand here today side by side with strong leaders not only from Operation Rescue, but here in Iowa. Our United for Life Coalition, comprising of Faith and Freedom Coalition, Iowans for Life, Iowa Catholic Conference, the Iowa chapter of Concerned Women for America, and residents and leaders of Council Bluffs and the surrounding area. But we do not stand here alone. Since the fall, we have now more than 10,000 people that have signed our Iowa Right to Life petition just since this fall. Concerned Iowans who want their legislature to stop the pro-death agenda that pervades our cities, schools, and our state. I leave you with this. Yesterday marked 24 weeks since Mr. Carhart